Ahoy! Captain Benzie here, coming at you with an Intel Report. This series is where I sail off into the seas of Command & Conquer Rivals, plunder every unit of its secrets, and return with the treasure of knowledge. If you want to be part of my crew and help decide the direction that the gaming galleon sails in, consider becoming a Patreon. Details are on screen now and in the description below. Today we are looking at the latest unit to join the Brotherhood of Nod's arsenal, the Centurion. The Centurion is the result of Cain's demand for a mechanized Praetorian Guard worthy of defending God's chosen on Earth. The Centurion is piloted by battle-hardened veterans and equipped with a unique Testudo shield system, able to absorb heavy weapon attacks, making it ideal for defensive operations. Constructed from the Temple of Nod, the Centurion is a bipedal vehicle that makes for an imposing presence on the battlefield. Striding into the depths of your opponent's army, shield raised high, and cannon at the ready. The Testudo shield absorbs whatever attack is first to hit it, and takes a few seconds to recharge, making the Centurion highly resilient against slower firing units like GDI Titans or Nod Rockworms. In fact, in a 1v1 fight with either of these aforementioned units, the Centurion will come out on top, making them very cost-effective for holding pads and dealing with expensive, slow-hitting tech units. Do be very careful of faster volley-firing units like Sandstorms, or continuous damage units like the Nod Basilisk, Avatar, or Giga Cannon. In these cases, the first hit will drop the shield, and then the rest of the Sandstorm salvo, or the Avatar's laser beam, will just chunk straight through their health, melting them faster than a puppy melts hearts. This theory does also apply to multiple units. Send a couple of units in at once and hit the Centurion as many times as you can before the shield comes back up. Centurions are also surprisingly cheap and fast moving. This allows them to be built and positioned fairly quickly. Their cannon is also fairly damaging and will blow smoking craters through light vehicles, and wreck tanks relatively quickly if given the chance. As before, don't send units at Centurions one by one in an ant march to the death. Send 2 or 3 units at once to overwhelm them, chunk that shield, then send the Centurion off to meet the god it claims to serve. Now, in essence, Centurions are a fantastic answer to the slower tech units like Rockworms and Titans, and are a stubborn-to-shift unit for holding pads in the late game. So, what kind of deck does a Centurion fit into? Well, I've had fun with a couple, but being tech, these decks can be map-dependent in the higher leagues. I'd recommend watching my video on how to counter the double harvester tech decks, and then think about putting that into action in reverse. In short, tech decks require you to stall the missile launches and to protect your harvesters long enough to reach the point where the economy ramps into a speed fast enough to secure tech. Then roll across the battlefield with overwhelming force. Now, this first deck on screen now has been my personal favourite with Centurions. It's a War Factory opener, with the Cyber Wheels to start out, moving up swiftly through the War Factory to whatever you need. Attack bikes will help you deal with your opponent opening into War Dogs or Cyber Wheels, or if they've moved upwards from infantry into air. If your opponent is absolutely insistent on using infantry, then you have the Chem Buggies to spray the field in noxious green clouds of fun. Finally, for the War Factory, the Scorpion tanks here give you a bit of a stronger punch. Alongside the Centurions, Widowmakers will help deal with infantry and air, which the Centurions naturally struggle with. Essentially, this particular deck works by stalling the game long enough to tech up, then you seize and hold the pads. Once that's done, your Centurions will be tough to shift, especially once backed up with Widowmakers. You can also swap out the Widowmakers for artillery, especially since it's actually fairly decent now, to make for an even tougher defensive deck. Now, you'll be a little more vulnerable to air perhaps, but once you have Centurions on the pad with artillery behind them, it's very tough to shift. Artillery are also surprisingly good at clearing pads. That 3 range really means you can just slowly roll up and pound the pad from a distance. Now, You may also be tempted to swap the Scorpion tanks for stealth tanks if you do decide to go for artillery, simply because that will allow you to deal with air units that little bit better. Do be aware, of course, that the stealth tanks are just that little bit more fragile, so it really does come down to your Centurions to hold the line. The second deck I'd like to showcase today is one being run by Snipes, currently on ladder. Now this deck here plays on a single harvester, relying on cheap units for the most part. Laser squads make up our scouting unit early on, with flame troopers ready to deal with enemy infantry. From here we can tech up into the air tower with venoms for heavier anti-infantry and banshees to deal with enemy war factory units. Phantoms are then of course used as usual to keep the skies clear for our other air units. Centurions at last provide solid pad holding units and can handle almost any heavy units that your opponent can pull out in the late game. The general theory here is that you move into the air tower so fast that your opponent starts building anti-air options. By the time your Centurions hit the field, they have very little to counter those. Finally then, let's have a look at one of Snipes' replays using this latter Centurion deck. So this match is taken from the recent Rivals Champions event on Tide Pools. We have Snipes on the left and Tarlank on the right. Both are playing Nod decks. And Tarlank has gone straight into a Cyber Wheel opener. Snipes has got opened up with a Harvester without scouting. That's going to cause him problems as he's now opened up laser squads into cyber wheels. I'm pretty sure that Tarlank, yep, there it is going to pull out that second cyber wheel unit so that nothing Snipes can do with that poor little laser squad is going to make a difference. Now Snipes knows at this point his opponent is likely to pull out more cyber wheels, so as you can see he's not buying more laser squads. No point fighting a battle that he's not going to win. He's going to tech up, and here it comes. Straight into a Banshee. Those cyber wheels are utterly useless against the Banshee, which is just going to wreck them. He's also pulled out a laser squad. Now the reason for the laser squad is that he's anticipating with a cyber wheel opener that as soon as his opponent sees a Banshee, it's going to move into attack bikes. Curiously, that hasn't happened, and Tarlank has actually moved down tech into the hand of Nod to have laser squads. So in comes Snipes' flame squads. Unfortunately, those cyber wheels are still going to wreck through those flamers. And Snipes, are we going to contest that pad? Yes, we are. Now, unfortunately, those laser squads, even though it's only two of them, it's still going to be fairly damaging. So currently we're contesting both pads, and Snipes is hoping to move through and just clear that top pad. That Banshee coming in from Tarlank, unfortunately pushed back by the laser squads, gunned down by Snipes' Banshee. And oh no, not quite, and then the Venom comes in and just sneaks that launch. Now with the Banshee on its tail and with its Oksana boost for the extra damage, that Venom needs to pull back out of there. Perfect time for him to move north and to... Ooh, okay, we've got a little bit of Banshee on Banshee interaction there, and the attack bikes is just going to clean that up nice and quickly. So the Venom is here to deal with the flame squads, and having seen those bikes, nopes the heck out of there. Now that is beautiful positioning with those laser squads. Now, if those bikes want to come anywhere near that Venom, you can just, as you can see, Snipes can pull back and forward as he sees fit. Unfortunately, those flame troopers are going to cause a bit of a problem to that wall, and that's where our first Centurion comes out. Now, there's nothing on the board that Centurion is countering. Quite the opposite. This is now just going to be a really tough unit to deal with for Tarlank. It's something that Snipes can use to just push onto those pads, take a bit of damage, while the rest of his army cleans up what else is on the board. Those Phantoms are going to come in to just give some bit of air domination, just because we know that the Centurion cannot do anything to air units. But even then, you can see the Centurion just refuses to take damage. Even with a Banshee shooting at it, the Centurion just takes so little in the way of damage that it can just comfortably hold the pads while the rest of the army cleans up everything around it. Second missile goes to Snipes, and that is game. Well played, Snipes. I hope that's helpful. Be sure to check out my other intel reports if you're struggling against certain units, or looking for tips as to how to best apply a new unit in your deck. Also check out my Acting on Instinct series with analysis of game mechanics and solid advice on how to get ahead in Rivals. Hit that like button if you enjoyed this video, and be sure to subscribe to be up to date and ahead of the game. Happy sailing, and see you on the battlefield.